Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to February 2021, the virtual Engage Boot Camp from Infinity Workforce Solutions. We are so very pleased to have you with us here today. Now, in just a moment, or several moments, we'll be bringing on our guest speaker of the day, Jeremy Reymer, who is the CEO of DriverReach. But before that time, first I want to welcome back those of you who have joined us for our session back in November and our session also in January. Thank you. We're glad to see you again. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We are so glad that you are here joining us today and the rest of this week, sharing the information that we're going to get from our wonderful speakers about the various subjects that we're going to be talking about, all of which focus on recruiting and retention. The reason that this entire event exists is because of feedback that we received at our two previous boot camps. This is what people are struggling with. This is what people need to know more about and get some good ideas that they can take and make their own. Now, how this is going to work for those of you who have not been with us before is we're going to have a session set aside at the beginning of each day to do some housekeeping, help folks get caught up because not everybody will be joining us for each day. So then we'll complete our session, bring on our speaker, and we'll have them with us for about an hour. And then at that time, we're going to be opening it up to the floor to ask questions of them. I know there are going to be things that come up that you're going to want to know more about or how they can apply to your specific organization. And this entire event is about collaboration. So we want to hear those questions. Now, before we continue further, I want to introduce myself. My name is Craig Hart. I'm with our marketing operations department here at Infinity Workforce Solutions. And my background is distance learning and e-learning. I have been in that world for over 15 years, initially in the financial services industry, working with groups like Aflac, Farmers, Northwestern Mutual. My co-host today, and what seems like every day, is Mr. Mark Ray. Now, Mark is a former trucking executive with 35 years experience in this industry. 30 plus of those years came with Frozen Food Express, a frozen food hauler that I'm sure some of you are familiar with and have seen their trucks on the road. And now Mark is an advisor to companies both within and without the trucking industry, and we are very blessed to have him joining us here today. Mark, how are you doing, sir?
I'm fantastic. Today is kicking off what appears to be the #1 issue in our industry, the driver shortage. And obviously, nobody has has cracked the code on exactly how to address this issue. We're going to cover today recruiting and some of the trends that we've seen. How can we reach the motoring opportunities that are out there, set the tone for a successful entry into a fleet. The next day, we're going to have George from Indiana, who operates a 21 terminal tanker fleet, to go over best practices relative to both recruiting and retention. Thursday, we've got women in trucking. How can we involve them? And of course, we've got the famous Dan Baker joining us on Friday to give us some good old common sense on how can we manage through the driver shortage that we're seeing up close and personal. So I'm looking forward to it. I've spent well over 35 years in this industry, and this driver shortage issue is really intense. So Craig, I'm really looking forward to this week and today's, especially with Jeremy, new strategies and trends in recruiting. So here we go.
Excellent. All right, now for those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, unfamiliar with our boot camp event, what is boot camp and why do we call this boot camp? Well, there has been an explosion in the last 12 months of virtual events, symposiums and roundtables. Our philosophy is We want to make this event meaningful and impactful for your organization. It's intense. It's a short period of time, but we're going to cover a lot of ground. And the goal is just like you would expect from the military. It is designed to teach you skills and tactics that will help you survive and thrive. Now, Mark, I know you are former military, so you understand the boot camp concept intimately, having participated in them. I mean, this is going to be a lot of ground that we're going to cover here in the next couple days.
Yeah, so the boot camp concept is pretty simple. You come out better than you enter. So we're going to have some highlights that we want to cover as we go through this series. There's some takeaways, some to-dos, some tasks, and hopefully we'll have a lot of input from the chat line, the Q&A. We want to hear what works out there in the field, what you've tried and worked and what you tried and didn't work. And I'm seeing the chat come in, so I'm hoping we get some very active activity on the chat as we go through this difficult issue.
Absolutely. Now, some of you are not familiar with Infinit-I Workforce Solutions. This may be the first time that you've had an opportunity to learn more about us and participate in one of our events. Why are we doing this? Well, the reason is that we have been in this industry for a significant period of time now. We were celebrating our 21st year in business. And over the course of that time, that has allowed us to meet and learn from some great minds in our space. And we feel that it's imperative to step up in this time and share these voices with you so that you can succeed and grow. And so we wanted to put this together to deliver that value to you. Previously, we had held live events that we call boot camps. Obviously, we had to table those with the coronavirus. But what we found from those boot camps is we would fly people into our Dallas office and have them there for 2 days and talk with them about safety training and how that can help their organization improve their bottom line in a myriad of ways. And the goal with that is kind of an extension of or goal of this rather is an extension of that. And while we do hope to get back to those live events, hopefully sooner rather than later, now that the vaccinations are being deployed, we still want to be able to present valuable information to the folks that we work with, or even just folks out in the industry in general that can benefit from this. Because as Mark said, this is a critical problem, recruiting and retention. There is no magic bullet. And one of the things that you'll notice from our docket of speakers is we're trying to tackle this problem from several different angles. And we're hoping that if we give you a number of weapons that you can take back to your organization, that those are going to help move the needle cumulatively for your organization. Now, as Mark said, just a quick rundown of our agenda. Today we have Jeremy Reymer, President and CEO of DriverReach. He's going to be talking with us about recruiting and onboarding and how that can be impactful for the folks that you're looking at and bringing on board. Tomorrow we have George Girth, who is the VP of Safety and Recruiting with Grammar Logistics out of Indiana. They are a bulk chemical hauler, and he has a ridiculously high retention rate and is going to be sharing with us how he is able to maintain that over time. And then on Thursday, we have Ellen Voya, the President and CEO of Women in Trucking. And Mark and I have had some conversations with her in preparation for this event and have gone through what she's going to share. And she just has a great mind for recruiting, marketing, and messaging. And are you appealing to the people that you want to bring in the door? Are you leaving recruits on the table because your recruiting messaging does not speak to them? So there's going to be some folks that are going to come out and take some long, hard looks at the recruiting ads that they're sending out right now. Based off of her feedback. And then Dan Baker, he is a living legend in this industry, and his focus is always on, it's a people industry, and drivers are what generates revenue for every organization on this call, and everyone within your company needs to understand that value and work to support them so that they can get home, get paid, and be safe. Now, how do our days work? Well, we're going to have this short session at the beginning of every day where we do some housekeeping, as I mentioned before. We're also going to look back on previous days' content as well. and set the stage for what's to come, and then we'll have our guest speaker come on board with us and speak with us for about an hour. Then we'll take questions from the audience and make sure that you get the answers that you need, and then we'll have some time at the end to reflect as well on what we've learned. In addition to that, everyone should have received their workbook. Now, this workbook we have put together as a PDF. It was emailed out to all registered attendees this morning. It is set up so that there are sheets designated for each day, and it's to help you take a real reflective look at your organization. What are the things that your group is doing in relation to the topic that we're going to be going over that particular day? And this actually was an idea that we got from Mark, because you guys have very busy lives and we can bombard you with information, but if you are not writing down what matters most to your organization, then the moment that you get off this call, you're going to be bombarded with phone calls and emails, and you're going to lose track of time and you're going to have your focus taken. So this workbook is meant to be your action plan once this event is over with. Now, Lindsay has said in chat that if you need the workbook, because I know sometimes they end up in spam filters, please email her to get that so that she can email that over to you, because we want you to have that in your hands so you can take advantage of that today and every day the remainder of this week. Now, what can you expect from us? Well, there's a couple things that you can expect. First and foremost, timeliness. We're very, very cognizant of the amount of time that this event takes and the amount of time that you don't have to spare in your day. So we will always be very mindful of that. Professionalism. We'll make sure that everything that we deliver to you is of a high quality and value, and that there will be valuable takeaways that you can make and take and be your own. So I just want to make sure that you understand that's what you can expect from us. Now, our expectations of you, we want you to participate. The engage in our title is not just lip service. We want to hear from you. None of us is as smart as all of us, and there are going to be questions that come up each day from our speakers that you're going to need answers to that will probably benefit someone else on this call. So the easiest ways to do that is we do have the chat function. Go ahead and open that up. That is on your menu on the top. When you click on the More button, the first thing underneath that will be chat. And then once you have that open, I would scroll down to the bottom. There is a button that says To, and adjust that so it says all panelists and attendees. And that way, if you have a question or a comment that you want to share with everyone else on the call today, everyone will be able to see it. Otherwise, if it just shows all panelists, myself and Lindsay can see it, and Mark can see it, but not everybody else on the call with us today. So make sure you get that up and running. And just to make sure that the chat is working, I know that we've got folks already chiming in from where they're at, and that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Glad to see that everyone was safe, and that those of you that are participating in what we fondly call Dalaska last week in our giant snowstorm and ridiculously cold temperatures survived and were able to join us today. We do appreciate that. We saw the footage as well on the news of the accidents and so forth. So it's our work is not done when it comes to safety training. So participation is key. Make this event your own. Make sure that you get the answers that you need. Now, why us? Out of all the groups of people that you could be listening to right now, why should you listen to us? We are an industry leader in the field of remote training. We have been doing this since just about the moment that CSA went live. We help over 1,300 companies across this country, ranging in size from one truck up to thousands of trucks, to deliver solutions that they take advantage of. We have 8 million views of our training content in any given year. So if you have any questions about, does safety training work? Do people participate? Yes, to the tune of millions and millions of views every single year. So we know what we're talking about, and we're here to help. We're here to support this organization. Just a couple of the outcomes that we help deliver from our own aspect of safety training: fewer violations by your drivers, lower CSA scores, increasing driver retention, and we will talk about how training plays a part of that tomorrow with George specifically, and a little with Jeremy today with DriverReach. Training costs going down. Jeremy is definitely going to be hitting on that today. Helping position your company for insurance renewal, improving your defendability in court, and reducing the number of accidents that your drivers find themselves in. So these are the ways that we can all make a difference, and then also bringing together these thought leaders to help share this information with you on these other areas that do impact your companies as well. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our previous events, we are bringing back our code word of the day contest again. This time it is for a 4K dual dash cam, both front and rear facing dash cams. This is for a car. This is not for a truck, but for those of you that work in an industry where you have these cams, you absolutely understand the value of having potentially one of these in your own car driving back and forth from work. Because just because you're not an 18-wheeler doesn't mean there aren't crazy people out there driving around you. So how does the daily code word contest work? Excuse me. Every day we will have a code word of the day that we will share at the end of the presentation. You must have all 4 code words to participate, and you will provide those to Lindsay at the end, and we'll share her email address when we share that code word at the end of today's presentation as well. And then if you have all code words in on Friday, then we will have you in a drawing for this dash cam. And then if you win, we'll send that your way. We will also, throughout this event, have a couple offers that we will make out to our audience as well that will be pertinent to the things that we're talking about. So we'll highlight those as we get to those in our presentation. All right, now, why are we here? Well, basically, we are here for the top concerns on ATRI's Top 10 2020 Carrier Concerns. Number 1, number 6, driver shortage, driver retention. These are huge. These have been huge for 10 years. 2020 brought us some unique challenges that dramatically lowered the availability of large swaths of the driver population, which we will be talking about. Mark, I know you and I were speaking offline before this call today about the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse and the tens of thousands of drivers that has removed from the active pool of available talent, and the fact that a large percentage of these drivers are not coming back. They have decided they would rather have a line of work where they can smoke a joint on the weekend and engage in some recreational drugs and not have to worry about that drug test impacting their ability to work Monday through Friday. So, and you know, that Mark, this I know is something that continues to be a giant problematic area. There continues to be discussion about testing. I was reading articles last week about hair follicle testing may or may not be included. So this is impacting everybody.
Yeah, I think driver shortage is up front and personal with everybody. And just as a quick, you know, our previous boot camp focused on insurability, defense arguments, and the whole issue with insurance, which is a really big issue. But the driver shortage is really intensified. It's not going away. So I'm looking forward to all of our discussion relative to that, and how do you address it? What do you do about it? It's easy to identify. It's very difficult to turn the dial on this issue.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, I know Jeremy is on with us already, so let us go ahead and get his camera turned on. Oh, sorry, one more thing before. Looking ahead, again, George Girth, VP of Safety and Recruiting with Grammar Logistics, will be joining us tomorrow. I know George is already on the call listening in today. Hi, George. All right. Jeremy Reymer, President and CEO with DriverReach. Jeremy, how are you doing today? Oh, looks like
I realize I have to unmute.
There you go.
I'm doing my job, not trying to make any distractions. So awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
No problem, sir. We are very pleased to have you here today. I guess, would you give us a little bit of background on yourself and let us know about DriverReach? There's probably folks on this call who are not familiar with what you do.
Sure. And let me ask you this, from a presentation standpoint, are you going to be in control of?
Yes, sir. I'll control the slides. You just let me know when you need me to move forward.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Okay. Well, first, again, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to not only share with the group, but just to really highlight, as I will today, our partnership with Vertical Alliance Group. As you indicated, this is an extremely hot topic, right? Recruiting and retaining drivers is harder today, I think, than I've ever seen in nearly 20 years in the industry. So I trust the work that you've put into this boot camp, that everyone will learn something that they can take back and hopefully make a big difference in their operation. So a little bit about me. I know you've got a bio slide up there. My primary goal is to help companies hire drivers faster and more efficiently, and improve their speed to hire. Prior to creating DriverReach, I owned a trucking company as well as a driver staffing company. And for over 15 years, all I did every day, all day long, was recruit, qualify, and hire truck drivers. And so I began to build technology and incorporate it into my business to improve efficiency. And I quickly realized that what I had built could really benefit the rest of the trucking industry. And so, which I realized most of which was using, antiquated technology, if any, to manage that, critical process of hiring CDL drivers. So in 2016, I founded DriverReach to bring a more innovative and progressive solution to the industry, and sold my driver staffing business the following year. Do you mind if I share a kind of a funny story about that?
Sure, go right ahead.
That process. Don't know how many people have the luxury of, selling a business, but it was interesting. I went to New York City, met with a private equity group, had, meeting, and then had dinner and some drinks that night. Was staying at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which is a beautiful, historic piece of property, right, in Manhattan. And late Thursday night, I already had a few drinks. Me and a couple others that were staying also at the hotel, went to the bar there. It was packed, and had another couple drinks. And it was, kind of getting late, time to wrap things up. And it was still very crowded. And I saw that there was an opening at the bar. And so I said, I'm going to have one more. I'm going to have a beer, nightcap, which, good decisions are made after you've had a few cocktails. And so anyway, I go up to the bar, and there's a woman on my right, a gentleman on my left. And I tell, order a beer. And the woman says, what brings you to town? And I said, just, business, have a meeting today, leaving tomorrow. And, she seemed like a, polite, nice person. I said, how about you? Thinking that's the appropriate thing to do. And she says, same, just business. And I said, what do you do? She said, I'm an escort.
All right.
I said, I'm an escort. And I realized, it took me a few seconds, again, alcohol delays the senses a little bit. It took me a few seconds to realize that's not at all. We're on totally different planes. And
you are an S corp with a P.
Right. Well, she realized, that I wasn't going to be a client of hers, and she left. And so I really felt pretty foolish and naive. And the gentleman that was on my left, starts talking to me, and he says, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. He goes, you don't get out much, do you? And I said, I don't run into stuff like this at the, Courtyard Marriott, at the restaurant, the Courtyard Marriott in Columbus, Ohio, so anyway, no more escort. Right?
Okay.
After selling my staffing company, I established DriverReach as an LLC. So fool me once.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
There's a few things before we get into the next slide that I would like to highlight about us or DriverReach, just kind of who we are, maybe, and how we think. Extremely committed to improving the trucking industry. You might see us all over the place. I'm really active and involved in ATRI, Research Advisory Committee, as well as American Trucking Association's Workforce Development Committee. I really enjoy being that involved, and I want to be part of the solution to make things better. We do have deep-seated partnerships, obviously, with you as well. And I think at the end of the day, those partnerships, those integrations, they just help provide a better experience for the end user, for the customer. And then we firmly believe that it's important to consider the entire recruiting process from the driver's perspective. So it's critical that we make it as easy as possible, right? So you'll hear me say this a lot. Better recruiting begins with a better applicant experience. And so it might be appropriate then to move on to the next slide.
I think it's actually good that we talk about that, just to let people know the applicant experience is going to determine, and the speed and ease with which it happens is going to determine whether you get that recruit or that recruit is going to go someplace else that is responding smoother, more quickly, and so forth. So it's important that we talk about that, and it's important that we talk about those technology tools that maybe folks on this call are. I'm sure they're aware of some of them, but probably not all of them. And you cover a lot of ground here that we're going to be talking about here momentarily. So I'm excited that people are going to be able to hear about all these different things that they can be doing, because I guarantee you they're not all doing them all,
No.
and they need to be. So.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. As you know, the title of this presentation is Embracing Recruiting Technology in a Remote World. And just kind of to set the stage, for the past full year now, it's right at a year, all our jobs, our lives, everything significantly impacted by a global pandemic. I'm still working remotely. I'm in my house, in my, little library that has now been converted into my office. Our entire office in headquartered in Indianapolis has been remote since March of 2020, and our office lease actually was up in October, and we didn't renew. So that's just this is what we're used to now.
Sure.
And it's changed our structure as a company. It's changed how we operate, and I think even this boot camp has changed. This used to be an in-person event, right?
Correct.
It's virtual, and it's the largest one ever.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. So, no, it has been transformational, and it's the speed with which it's happened.
Yeah,
has also been remarkable. This is not. We were not giving moments where, or an extended time frame where you could spend a lot of time analyzing. Okay, well, if we want to take advantage of this mobile process or this virtual process, we've got 30 days, we've got 60 days, we've got 90 days. No, you've got literally days, potentially just weeks that you can make these decisions in and flip and move. And that is actually a testament to the people that are on the call with us today, that they were able to do that and were able to make those tweaks, make those changes so that they could continue to do business and grow and be profitable. So.
Well, and I don't think we would have been able to do this, say, 10 years ago. I don't think we were quite there with technology like we are today. Much greater bandwidth for video.
Absolutely.
Connectivity, Zoom. I'm sure we can all remember this time last year as it was just really starting to unfold. Just chaos. There was chaos. Chaos reigned, and we didn't know what we didn't know at that time. It was a little bit scary, but many of us working remotely as most of the states were shut down. And it was during that time that, a lot of companies began to embrace the technology that we're talking about here and to address the shortcomings in their operations that were exposed by, needing to be remote. And by the way, this isn't a trucking phenomenon only. Nearly every company and nearly every industry faced the same issue. And so companies began adopting technology at an increasing rate to maximize their efficiencies, but and to do that in a remote environment in order to prevent the risk of contagion. So I say this a lot too in regards to that whole phenomenon where the phrase necessity is the mother of invention is used pretty regularly, and it speaks to if something needs to exist, people will invent it to solve this problem. But in our case, I think necessity is the mother of adoption. Out of necessity, we began to adopt the technology that existed already, but in order for us to be able to adapt to this new environment. And this dynamic, continues to unfold as technology continues to evolve. The appetite to embrace it, continually increases. And for the companies who have taken on new technology, there's no turning back. I mean, it's not going to change, right? So the efficiencies that are gained are way too valuable to revert back to a more manual or time-consuming process, even when we're completely on the other side of this pandemic.
I agree. Even from what we're hearing on the training side of things, is there are groups that have gone 100% remote. There are groups that went 100% and pulled back and went, we lost the entire human touch, and that's not something we were comfortable with. So we have a smaller element of in-person elements or in-person aspects of our training that we still do. But But no, I haven't talked to anyone that says, but we're really looking forward to go back how we were doing everything in 2019. No one has told me that yet. So
yeah, and I don't anticipate it. And in fact, I'd say that everything that we're going to talk about today, from a technology standpoint, this is all stuff that's existed for years. Some longer than others, but hasn't really been widely adopted yet in the trucking industry, at least as it has in some other more innovative and progressive industries. So I think given that backdrop, we can kind of discuss what that means to us today. If you're ready to move on to the next slide. And so I know this is kind of really where it starts, right? I mean, what's the first step in hiring a driver? What needs to happen before you can even begin the hiring process, right? A driver needs to apply, right? You either need some short form, lead form, or a complete DOT application, but you've got to get that. And again, better recruiting begins with a better applicant experience. So that's kind of what we're.
Oh, looks like his email or internet hung up there for a second. Oh, Jeremy, we lost your last like 5-10 seconds there. Your internet burped on us.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
As I was,
it's all right. So applicant experience. Now, Mark, you and I were talking about this before the call. We were talking, there are probably people on this call right now who still do paper apps.
Absolutely. And I've just got a quick comment on the ease of application and setting the tone for a successful onboarding. Research clearly shows disrespect is a major contributor to driver turnover and the driver shortage. Jeremy, is it your opinion that you can set the tone for driver respect at the application stage?
Well, what does respect mean? I mean, and I say that it's sort of a rhetorical question, because respect means that you're paying them a fair wage, right? Respect means that you value their time and you don't make them jump through so many ridiculous, unnecessary hoops because you haven't been courteous enough to consider this process from their perspective. They have lots of choices. So again, better recruiting begins with a better applicant experience. We all spend advertising dollars and doing what we can to attract drivers to us. It's important that we're providing them with a good experience. And, by the slide, mobile is a must. I mean, that's table stakes now. Every driver, or virtually every driver, has a smartphone. That's what they're using to visit you online. So if we're asking them to complete a form of any sort, it really needs to be as simple and easy as possible, especially from a mobile device. And the other thing I'd say is when drivers visit your website, how easy is it for them to see where to apply? It's not uncommon that, first of all, it needs to be front and center. It's not uncommon where, you got to click up here to resources and careers and then 6 other layers before they can finally get to a point to fill something out. And that's just not a good experience. You've got to make it easy.
So the ease of application is indirectly showing respect to the applicant.
Certainly.
Right up front, setting the tone for a successful onboard.
Right. We make it easy. I mean, we are consumers, right? We go online to buy something. And if you don't want you don't want them to abandon the process. You know that whoever you're buying something from online or wherever you're visiting, if you have intent there, they've got to make it easy for you. That's product marketing, if you want to, in that case. But it's still, at the end of the day, you've got to really make it as easy as possible for them. And that does not include a downloadable PDF. So I had a conversation with a carrier here in Indianapolis. This is right before, it's pre-pandemic. And I've known the guy for years. And he says, hey, he wasn't a customer of ours at the time. And he said, hey, listen, I need to talk. There are about 100 trucks, flatbed operator. Drivers are home every single day. I can't hire drivers for the life of me. It's killing me. And those things, I mean, flatbed is certainly a more difficult position than a dry van. But that being said, local, home every day, and that should be a little easier. But the problem was, as I'm talking to him and I'm looking at his website, he says he's paying a couple $1,000s a month for a job board that he said they're horrible. They're not working. And I said, don't take offense. Don't shoot the messenger here. But it doesn't, he said he was spending $2,000 a month. I said, it doesn't matter if you spend $20,000 a month. Look at where you're directing people to. I said, no offense, but it's old. Your website is not mobile friendly whatsoever, antiquated site, and the link to apply is a PDF that the driver needs to download. So it doesn't matter what you have a huge hole in your boat. You have to fix that. And so, the point that I'm getting at there is recognizing the importance of that driver experience. How is this process from their perspective? And one thing, most people don't do this, but one way to kind of gauge that is if you measure the analytics of your Apply Now button. For every click that button generates, what percentage of actual lead forms or applications are you getting? And if, that is a powerful, that'll wake you up. It can wake you up when you realize a lot of people are clicking on that and they see the pain that you might be putting them through, and they just say, forget it. I'll just go find somebody else who makes it easier for me. So it's important, again, to consider this from their perspective, because at the end of the day, and I would say, they're valuable. These leads, drivers that come in, that express interest in you, they're valuable assets. And so, you don't want to waste them. You want to do everything you can to get them into your funnel. And I would say, as much as everyone would on this call probably say, I want full DOT applications. I get it. We all do. But let's be realistic. Make it easy for them first. We'll get the full DOT apps if you can. But if you can't, rather than them abandon the process and us just say, I'm not having it, give them an opportunity to provide just enough information that you can begin some dialogue, and then you'll get the full DOT application. But the point is, especially as the driver shortage, I think, continues to intensify, it's important to make it as easy as possible for as many as possible. Are we ready to dive into the next? Now they're in our funnel, right? We paid to attract them to us in the first place. We need to treat them as the valuable assets they are, and make sure that we provide a good experience. So I mentioned chatbot technology. This is, interestingly, this is Grammar's website. This is not a chatbot they have on their website, but George is a good friend. I felt like it would be a nice promotional opportunity here to highlight their website there. So from a technology standpoint, a couple things I'll point out, chatbot and the next thing. But as drivers visit your website or landing page, it's helpful that to incorporate chatbot functionality that allows them to engage with you immediately and while they're right there on your site. Now, not everyone will choose to engage this way, and that's okay, but we at least want to give them that opportunity. Now, this can come in handy, especially when it's after hours or on a weekend and there's no one available to follow up with them right away via phone, which is generally the best practice when a driver submits a lead form or a DOT application. Which leads me to another great feature. If you would click again, I think, there you go. Yeah, the ability to self-schedule. As it is one of the major frustrations that recruiters have is the inability to connect with an applicant after receiving a lead form. They might call that driver 4 or 5 times and they never get a call back. And so, the driver doesn't answer the phone because they might be busy at that moment, or they don't recognize the phone number. So the recruiter, might end up writing off that driver as not interested and ends up moving on. But just imagine, instead of that awful experience, the applicant's able to click on a link that opens up your calendar, and they can select a date and time that they want to talk to you. They know that tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. They'll be in a position to talk. So that's the time they select. And then when you call them tomorrow at 9:30, they answer and now you're connected. They knew that you were calling. So you're better able to move that applicant through your process now that you've had your first contact. Now, that self-scheduling link can be, first of all, that's free. Anybody's heard of Calendly? It's free. That functionality is free. That self-scheduling link can be inserted in that chatbot, or if you don't utilize a chatbot, you can use the link in any email or text communications that you might have with applicants, which, by the way, you definitely should be using a platform that enables you to communicate via text. Any comments there before we move on to the next slide, talking about some automation?
Question I had, what was the name of that service again? Because I'm all about helpful free resources to share with the group.
Calendly like a calendar, but Calendly, and it might be, I don't know if you just Google Calendly.
Okay, we can get Lindsay to get a
Yeah,
oh,
it's great.
someone's already shared a link to it there in chat.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Chat is working. Sweet.
So from an automation standpoint, before we dive into some of the primary recruiting functionality that I'll be highlighting, I do want to point out the importance of considering automation at every step of the way. Anything you can do, you hear of AI, IA is intelligent automation. It's kind of the inverse of the AI, acronym there. But point is, anything that we can do that we can automate to help speed up the process, certainly not removing humans from the important parts, i.e. the dialogue, the conversation, but freeing them up to have better ones. I think that's really important. And this, as you know, this presentation, my intent here is not to highlight DriverReach so much as to identify the utilization of technology,
Sure.
in this case, automation, to streamline the hiring process and improve speed to hire. One of the things that DriverReach does, though, to help in that regard, is the automation of previous employment verifications as soon as that driver submits a DOT application. It's important, that verification process by far is the most cumbersome and manual part of hiring a driver. It's awful. Anything that be done to cut that down is a time savings and a candidate savings. In many cases, when drivers are applying to multiple companies at the same time, as we already touched on, the company that is most efficient in that process will generally have the opportunity to make that hire. So I mentioned earlier about communicating with drivers via email or text. Another important and easy automation is the ability to automatically respond to those inquiries to a lead form or a DOT app via email or text to each applicant. So if you click it again, we'll see that. Hit the slide button there.
Well, actually, I had a question come in. I want to ask you real quick, Jeremy,
sure.
Because we've been talking about the texting back to applicants. Do you have any guidance or best practices you recommend in terms of how that is done? Obviously, with active drivers.
Don't use this. Don't use this.
Okay.
Use a platform. Don't use your personal phone. That's poor, not best practice. It's really bad practice. Not even for a lot of reasons. All of that data is not captured anywhere, and you could face liability issues that you just don't want, where that you have some protections when using a platform.
A third-party platform. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
So now that being said, I know it happens, and at the end of the day, and especially it probably happens more so in really small fleets, and it's not the end of the world. I think the risk from a liability standpoint is less than the poor practice of not being able to keep all that data stored in one place, and when you're communicating with somebody through a platform, any communication inbound or outbound is all stored there. And so that's, so you have a activity timeline, you have a frame of reference for any communication that you had. Same with email. So I think that's one of the, probably the better or best benefits of that. And so, yeah, thank you. Yeah. On the autoresponder functionality, this is certainly, I think, helpful, when it's after hours or on a weekend, kind of like the chat bot, but it's still very effective to do right away regardless, since we all recognize the importance of having immediate follow-up every time a driver applies. So in this case, when you have automated responses, you have complete control over whatever that messaging, may be. But it's important that you are communicating and that you are communicating right away.
And just to reinforce that for everyone on the call, the speed with which you respond is absolutely critical to being able to capture a candidate. I mean, you're competing against other people potentially that they're looking at as an opportunity, and they're going to respond more favorably to those who respond quicker to them than vice versa. So even if it's a situation where you have oh, hey, we're closed for the weekend, we can't call you back until Monday. I mean, you still want to communicate
Right.
the interest, the excitement. You don't just want to go, hey, we'll call you back on Monday. They're going to be talking to the guy that's reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're so excited to hear from you. So that the speed with which you reply is huge,
Yep.
huge.
100% agree. All right. So for the remainder of the presentation, this is what we'll really, primarily focus on. Just really the utilization of some simple recruiting technology that can make a huge difference in your recruiting efforts, not only for the process, but for the applicant experience. So we'll focus on the applicant tracking system, or ATS, and CRM. And then I'll highlight really the amazing benefits of e-signature and e-document functionality. Definitely something that's been leveraged throughout the pandemic. And obviously, since I'm participating in the boot camp here, I'll highlight the deep integration we share with you that dramatically improves the onboarding experience, and along with orientation and ongoing training. So let's move on to, from an applicant tracking system standpoint, I think most people understand what this is or what it means. Definitely plays a critical role when you're getting all those leads from drivers who complete, your forms, from any other advertising, any other channels that you're wherever you're marketing. Ideally, they're feeding into an ATS where you can manage them efficiently throughout the qualification process. Now, you don't want those leads to be just, sent to you in an email. That's part of the reason why having an applicant tracking system is important. Much more difficult to manage them in an email, very unorganized way and very manual. From within that ATS, you can perform all the necessary background checks, the employment verifications, and an ATS that integrates with various job boards, background check providers, and so on, really enables you to qualify drivers far faster and more efficiently. I think there's one more slide on ATS here. So while you're performing all those regulatory compliance related functions, it's all being contained in one system. So you're building that entire driver qualification file along the way electronically. And also within an ATS, you're able to accurately track any various marketing efforts, so you can determine what's working and what isn't. Because too often we spray and pray and just hope that we see something come of it. It's really important to be able to measure and track the performance of what you're doing and make sure that it's paying off for you. And I'd add one more thing real quick. There aren't a lot of ATS options out there that are specific to trucking. But one question I would always encourage people to ask is what's happening with their data? If every driver who applies through an ATS is now being marketed to by that ATS, that's a problem. Don't let your ATS work against you. Ask about your data privacy and make sure that that data is yours and yours only. It would just be kind of a word of caution there.
I'd like to chime in on this track and manage performance of your advertising spend. One of the things that we're going to continually come back to throughout this week is testing your recruiting message. Are you running more than one? Are you testing performance of one over the other? How quickly are you doing that? Do you have a timeline where you go in and review the performance of your ads that you have out there? And the reason that I ask that is we got our start actually in the trucking industry as a job posting board. And one thing we became very good at many moons ago, back when we were called Bubba Junk, is we could tell very quickly, usually within hours, if a marketing message or a recruiting message that a client had deployed was successful. Did it increase the number of clicks, or did the clicks go down? And we actually had a large client of ours. This is a national carrier. I'm not going to name them on this call, but I will say that they had $5 million tied up into this advertising recruiting spend. And they came to us last in this process and said, here's the message that we want to use, deploy this. It's going to tie into all these other things we've already paid for. And we said, are you sure? We haven't tested this at all yet. And they said, this is what we're doing. So we deployed it. And within 4 hours, their click-through rate dropped by 84%. So this is obviously not the right message. So if you all are preparing to have large-scale spends on your recruiting advertising, test your message out. Whatever system that you were using, have a couple different ones. We do testing all the time on our messaging here internally, from our emails to how we define training content, to see what people respond to better. And you might be surprised by some of the results that you see, but absolutely recommend that you're reviewing the results of these, so that if something is not working, that you're tweaking it. And the beauty of the recruiting side of things is you can know fairly quickly if a message is not gaining any traction versus one that is.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's important to track, no question, and to keep your finger on that pulse. And by the way, things can change. What might have worked really well for you a year ago or 6 months ago, you might start to see that degrade as something else starts to improve. And so you have to be aware of that, and again, keep your finger on that pulse.
What do you usually recommend as a time frame for someone to go in and track performance?
Well, and again, this is not to plug DriverReach, but in the platform, that's happening dynamically. So every single time you can plug in what your spend is for this particular, let's just use Craigslist. If you're using a link there, you're creating a separate link. So every time that is a driver applies to that link, it's being tracked. And so, I mean, on a weekly basis, at the very least, I would expect, I mean, it's a click of a button to view this report. It depends on whose role and what if they have a whole bunch of other jobs. But if that's somebody's only job, then you should do it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, if we only had one job at a trucking company. So
now, next slide, if you would.
Sure.
Efficiency gains don't obviously end with the applicant tracking system. I think CRM functionality is something I really want to highlight here. And a lot of you may wonder why I'm even bringing up CRM. And, you know, for most of you, you know, from a sales perspective, you know, the most effective salespeople use CRM all the time. And that's what they use to prospect, to manage their leads through that sales process. And so, you know, that's what they're using, you know, to manage their sales efforts. And there's really no difference here. Recruiters also need to be using a CRM, especially in today's driver shortage environment. Recruiting is sales. If we can agree on that, and the parallels are endless, the parallels between recruiting and sales. Now, CRM is traditionally referred to as customer relationship management, but in the world of recruiting, it's candidate relationship management. And whether you have one recruiter or 100 recruiters, but using basic CRM functionality will dramatically improve your rate of connection with those leads and manage all those leads toward a conversion to hire. Now, as I shared earlier, those leads, the applications and so on that you get, those are valuable assets. You're certainly excited about the ones that you hire, but the ones you don't are still really valuable, right? They're not chopped liver. Now they're in your database. Use simple CRM technology to stay top of mind to them. You can establish a monthly newsletter, send that to all the drivers who you didn't hire, but still appear to be prospects, right? These are the same people that you probably called 6 times and they never answered and you wrote them off. Well, don't write them off entirely, right? They are a CDL driver interested in working for you. Let's now you just put them in this sequence and continue to sort of hopefully stay top of mind to them. Send email blasts, text blasts to drivers maybe in certain areas that you're specifically hiring for. I mean, this is your database. You've paid advertising, marketing dollars to get them into your funnel. So don't waste it. Keep an open dialogue with them electronically. And with basic CRM functionality, you can send a variety of drip campaigns to any group of drivers in your database. And this is not a new concept. I remember back during the Great Recession, I was talking to the owner of a large carrier in Indiana, well-known, great outfit. And at that time, I was visiting him, and he had a sign on the door that says "Not hiring," for drivers. And he was just resisting any applications, any applicants. And he complained that he had, because that's the first thing I noticed when I'm like, his name's John. You have a sign. He's like, we got trucks sitting. It didn't make any sense for me to take any applications. And I'm like, I'm going to disagree. And here's why. I suggest just be candid with them. It's nothing wrong with saying, hey, thanks for your interest. If you be interested in filling this out, we're not hiring right now, but I would like to be able to communicate with you as soon as that, turns around. It could be next week, could be in months. But at the very least, collect their information, right? That way, not really if, but when things do turn back around, those could be some of the first people you reach out to. He could add them to his database and communicate with them before he starts spending money on advertising. So, again, people who have a CDL and interested in working for him. So he asked if I would be interested in doing any consulting work for him. I said, no, free advice. So point there, CRM functionality, is really valuable. And it's not just for the recruiting side. It also can play a critical role in retention.
And that's something for folks to think about on this call too, because you've brought it up, how you communicate with people. If you're calling someone exclusively, calling them 6 times in a row, you are potentially trying to reach out to someone who doesn't respond well to phone calls.
Sure, good point. Yeah.
May love text messages. It's something to be very cognizant of. Yes, we all have these smartphones. We don't all like talking on them.
Right.
And so varying up the message, the way that you communicate to people is also part of that. And that can be, combination of calls, texts, emails. There are even groups out there that do send paper letters from time to time just because it is unusual now.
Yeah, you stand out 100%.
So think about the way when you are communicating with this funnel of people that have expressed an interest, but maybe you're not ready for them or they're not ready for you. That doesn't mean that's no, not now, not no forever. That you're varying the way that you communicate with them so that you cover as many options as possible to make sure that they're hearing from you. So that is
be all things to all people, so you can hopefully save some. All right, next slide. You can track from a CRM standpoint. You can track who's opening your emails, who's clicking on a link in them, and if you're monitoring that closely, you can use those clicks, right, that engagement, as a sign of a potential warm lead. So this is one effective way to prioritize the best drivers to reach out to with any outbound phone calls. This is sales, right? Recruiting is sales. It's much smarter use of time. If you have a database of 1,000 drivers and you going to sort them alphabetically and just start calling from the top? That's not smart. That's, it's not going to be effective. Instead, you can prioritize that list by their level of engagement with your email marketing communications. So, and when you use CRM, by the way, all of these communications are tracked and recorded, right? You have better visibility into all that's happening with each lead, and you can create follow-up tasks and reminders so that no drivers slip through the cracks. It's really about staying on top of each of these leads, managing them through your process as efficiently as possible. And when you have a conversation with a driver and you find out, say they're just outside your hiring criteria, right? Maybe they just need a few more months to be over the cusp that you need, or maybe they have one more infraction and you can't work with them yet, but it's going to fall off in 6 months. You can create a follow-up task for 6 months from now. Call Bob and see how he's doing. Does he have the experience now that if he's still been driving? Because if you don't do that, you will not call Bob in 6 months. You will not even be thinking about Bob in 6 months. We're not that sophisticated. Use technology, leverage technology to tell you what to do in 6 months. That's going to be far more helpful. And so,
also, another thing to think about with that, and this ties back into some of the things that we have heard on our last 2 Engage boot camps, is this helps you follow your own hiring policy. So if you're requiring a certain amount of time and a driver does not hit that threshold, you can set reminders to go back to talk to them when they have crossed that threshold. So say, for example, you require 2 years of experience over the road. They only have 20 months.
Yeah.
And you want to revisit with them in 4 months when they do hit your criteria, because otherwise you're in violation of your own hiring policy, which has legal liability issues. And yes, people have lost in court. Trucking companies have lost in court by hiring against their own policy or hiring outside of policy. So that is actually a great tool that has value on beyond just bringing that driver on board. It's protecting your organization.
Right. And as your database continues to grow, you can reduce a lot of your ongoing marketing spend. You can continue to remarket, to your growing database. Now, marketing agencies and I say job boards probably don't want to hear me say that, but it's true. And I'm not ever suggesting that you stop marketing, stop advertising. I think I'm working on a blog that's called Always Be Hiring. I mean, at the end of the day, you'll always be recruiting, always be hiring. Even if it's to replace maybe lower performers. At the end of the day, if you've got a new applicant that comes in that appears to be a really good hire, and you feel like you're full, look internally. Do you have some drivers that maybe aren't performing from a safety and compliance standpoint or aren't doing a really good job for you? Then there's an opportunity to upgrade, but you should always be recruiting. And so that being said, though, as you build that database, you can continue to communicate with them and stay top of mind. Now, when you combine an ATS with CRM functionality, you've got great tools to maximize your communication and efficiency and dramatically improve your speed to hire. Again, although that's what DriverReach does, that's not the point. I think we all can agree speed to hire is critical. Can't afford to lose drivers by not taking advantage of the simple technology that's available to us. And obviously, in many cases, you can reduce the time it takes to qualify and hire a driver from weeks to just a couple of days. If we can move to the e-signature, this is something that I think is super impactful. Kind of going back to early 2020 when COVID was just starting to wreak havoc, we were discussing our development roadmap internally, right? What our priorities were for development in 2020, and the build out of a comprehensive e-document signature solution was on the roadmap, but there were things ahead of it at the time. But because of the pandemic and the environment that everyone was thrust into, we decided to pull all our energy and into building a robust solution that our customers would immediately benefit from, especially while everyone was working remote and trying to figure things out. And that became a huge game changer as we started to receive interest from companies who they just wanted that feature in some cases, just so they can get rid of their expensive DocuSign account. So we didn't realize what we had kind of uncovered there, but it was a bigger deal. And so many companies were cobbling different technologies together and spending an exorbitant amount of money is kind of what we realized. And so this one feature enabled recruiters to improve the applicant experience and save significant time in orientation, especially since so many of the documents, they normally have a driver execute in person, having to fill them out by hand, and all of that could now be done electronically via email or text, autofilling with the driver's relevant information. And plus, once the driver had signed it, the driver would get an email copy, and then the document would be placed in the driver's electronic file. So the ability to create documents from scratch or upload Word documents or PDFs and then modify them with the appropriate insert fields, you can do all of that inside the interface. Just huge opportunity and benefit. And what I didn't realize, I think one of the byproducts was the fact that the number of drivers that end up ghosting or no-showing for orientation dropped significantly. It turns out if you keep them engaged leading up to orientation, they're much more likely to show up. So, yeah, especially when let's say Tuesday, and we say, we got our next orientation, next Wednesday or whatever it is, Monday. That's 6 days. There's a lot that can happen in that 6 days going on in that driver's, life and mind. But if you can, let's go ahead and pave the way so that when you show up, we're ready to go. You're not going to spend 3 days in a classroom setting. We can consolidate that down to say, one full day or a day and a half and get you on the road, get you generating income, generating revenue for the company.
What would you recommend someone in terms of say if they had a 5-day window of time between the time a driver expressed interest in that next training class, what would you recommend someone like have something different every day out to that driver?
I don't think it's not a question that deserves a blanket response, because it really depends on the company's makeup and how large they are and what can they accommodate. Where are they hiring from? Does it need to be in person? I would always wonder and ask, is it possible that you can do everything that you need to do and not require someone to take a bus trip to Kansas City? Is it possible? If not, okay, then that's what you have to work with. But if it is, let's look at things that you can do to make sure that you're still checking all the boxes from a safety and compliance comfort standpoint. If you're going to require that driver to have a test, go through a driver test, then you want to make sure that you either are going to be doing that in person, or if you can work with somebody that can do that remotely that you've arranged for. There's so many different ways to answer that question. But I would say at the end of the day, when you put your glasses on of looking through the driver's lens, what's the best experience for them? It's certainly not dragging this out for a long time. If they're not working, then they're not collecting a paycheck, and that's weighing on them. And the longer you stand in the way of that happening, the less likely they're going to come work for you. So that's like maybe the best way I can answer that.
Sure.
And I know.
Go ahead.
I know we're almost. I think we're almost done, but
we got a little bit more here. So, but I want to talk about some of these things here. Just for those folks on the phone, there are some of you that are dabbling in this technology for the very first time. Jeremy's great in that he's broken out e-sign and document as separate items, just so that you understand that functionality. E-sign allows someone to put their signature onto a form. The e-document has the ability to allow them to fill that form out, add additional fields and so forth. So they are two different functions. So just when you are looking for that option that works for you, make sure that it's doing what you need it to do. I mean, this can be a tremendous time saver, e-documentation. Take away that file cabinet in your corner and be able to have all those documents online. One, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to find when you need them in the event of an accident or an audit. And that's one of the things we hang our hats on with our safety training is you can always find what you need because it's all electronic, it's in the cloud, it's wherever you need it, it's accessible on your smartphone or your laptop or your desktop. I mean, I think that's huge. So, and is going to be something that gathers more and more and more steam as time goes along. So it's some of the larger groups I see are embracing the e-documentation just out of necessity because of the amount of paper that they chase. But I still think it's valuable for smaller organizations as well, because it's just going to get everything one place, attached to one driver, and just make it simplify that process tremendously. Mark, when you were with FFE, was that something that you guys took advantage of on the documentation and e-sign?
Yes, especially on the releases to go forward with the applicant, and anything you can do to impact that lead to hire time frame. And I know we've got a lot of questions there. I would just throw this out to Jeremy. What's a reasonable lead to hire time frame? Is it a week? Is it 2 days? Is it a month? What's your comment on lead to hire?
Well, lead being not a DOT application, I would probably add a day to a 2 or 3 time frame. So 2 or 3 day time frame. So 3 or 4 days. And I say that the assumption that I'm making here is that we're connecting with that person on day one, right? Because if I'm chasing him or her for a few days, then obviously that's going to extend things. But it's also, if I'm chasing him for a few days, that's an omen, as far as the potential of the opportunity to hire that driver. And I say all of that, Mark, because if I get a lead and I call that driver right away and it goes to voicemail, which it does probably 70% of the time, I'm going to leave a voicemail and I'm going to say, hey, Bob, thanks for your interest in ABC. Give me a call back, first chance you get. But I'm going to hang that up and I'm going to immediately send a text. And I'm going to say, hey, Bob, thanks for your interest in ABC. Just left you a voicemail. Let me know what time today you're available to connect. And I promise you, Bob will text you back, maybe call, but he'll text you back probably like quickly, like minutes. And you can arrange for that conversation. It's just simple things like that. And now I'm going to dramatically be able to speed up that process, because I can't do much if I don't have some dialogue with Bob. But if I can make sure I can get that done, then everything else afterwards is, especially with technology, can help me do that much faster and more efficiently.
So again, back to, originally we talked about respect. A fast speed to hire shows respect to the applicant.
Agreed. And again, when we say fast, and this is not, we're not cutting corners. I am a tremendous advocate for safety and compliance, checking every box that you can, reducing and mitigating risk every step along the way. But there is intentional, intelligent ways to do that, and use and leverage the technology that exists to expedite that process. And you will stand out, and you will win more of those, opportunities with drivers.
Do not ignore. I agree.
And then last, I think this is one of the last slides coming up. This is really more on the onboarding and training and integration. And I'd say this past year, especially with Infiniti's new i3 platform, we worked really closely with them and put together a really deep integration and partnership. It's enabled, I think, a new level of applicant and customer experience. So this is one of the beauties of technology, right? When two companies, technology companies, can cooperate via integration, everyone wins. So now when a driver reaches a particular stage, they can be assigned, the necessary onboarding and training modules, along with any documentation, and allows just for a much smoother and efficient process. So, and especially in a remote environment, that was another, big game changer. So hopefully, most of you know and appreciate the value of Infiniti's LMS platform. I'm a big proponent of our partnership, but even if it didn't exist, I'm still a fan of the concept of utilizing an LMS for purposes of onboarding and training. And, I think you guys know, I think Craig, Mark, you guys might know this, but, back in my, well before DriverReach days, back in 2010, I think, I employed close to 500 drivers, and I became an Infinit-I customer back then, and remained one actually until late 2017, when I ended up selling that company. And so, huge proponent of that concept, and I think it provides a ton of value for in this process, especially when when there's some integration opportunities there. I think it helps really streamline things.
DriverReach is one of the first groups that we have integrated with our IWS platform, so that the systems do communicate back and forth. API is the term that a lot of people are familiar with out there. That's what that means. And we're able to show information actually on both systems of what is completed with the training. And that is the goal there is to help be a time saver between the two systems for those folks out there that are mutual clients of ours and then want to take advantage of that. There are mutual clients of ours that choose not to take advantage of it because they have some other system that they'd rather do. But when you hear API, that's what that means. And an API can be a tricky animal because it does require two groups that want their systems to communicate with one another, and not everybody is capable or willing out there to be able to do that. I know we have a handful of partners that we work with just like you do, and we'd love to have more because it does make our lives easier. It does make the sharing of information simpler, but there can be challenges associated with that as well. So, but we've had our API with you now well over a year, I believe. So, because I believe it was beginning of last year that we were finally putting the finishing touches on that. So, because I remember where I was when we were discussing that. So, I was in our Texarkana office. But so that is an advantage that we have. But the onboarding and training, that's something that should be incorporated into any new hire process, regardless of what systems you were using, because that is the foundation of that legal protection that you want to put in place. It's that foundation of setting up your insurance renewal, being able to demonstrate to third parties that you are doing the right things with your drivers right from the get-go, in regards to educating them on your policies and training everybody who comes in the door. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when George joins us and talks to us about his training program and why he does it that way. So the training and onboarding piece is something that is tied into this recruiting and hiring process intimately, and it's definitely something that you all should think about. if your process, how does your process from one flow into the other? And are there opportunities to improve that
Mhm.
flow? Take the air out of it in some way, shape, or form, so that you can make sure that your people are going quickly from lead to hire. So
Right.
no,
And
awesome.
I think one last slide here. Just imagine. I like saying this. There's a Phil Jones wrote a sales related book, but we actually partnered with him to put one together for driver recruiting, and it's one of his famous phrases. Here's, and I'm not trying to pitch my book here, but it's Phil's book here, but it's the reason why I say it is he talks about, just imagine, and realizing that every decision is made at least twice, right? First in your head, hypothetically, before reality. And so, first you've got to imagine. And I guess the point here is really, embracing and leveraging technology will help streamline, better manage your recruiting, qualifying, and onboarding process. And with our partnership, I think that it extends to the orientation process and beyond. The ability to reduce the time it takes to onboard and train drivers will allow them to start generating revenue sooner, as I shared, but also just gives them a better experience at the same time, and will lead to improved retention. So I appreciate, Craig, Mark, the opportunity to share this today. And if there's any interest, by the way, in seeing a live group demo, there's a link there on the screen. Feel free to, we do this live demo for a reason. It's not sales pitchy. I don't like that. I don't want you to feel you're in a corner and anybody's trying to sell you something that you just want to kick the tires. And so that's why we did those group demos. So hopefully that's something that if it's of interest of anybody, I wanted to throw that link up there. And I don't know, I know we've been answering some questions along the way.
Sure. No, we've got more. So chat has been very active today, but I also wanted to point out, Jeremy, that you are an active blogger, active podcaster. Your brain never stops working on this world of driver recruiting technology. Is that something that people can find at the DriverReach website, so that if someone wanted to learn more, they're dabbling in the world of ATS for the very first time and just need to find out more about what that is, where could they go?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We do a lot of content, and again, it's not content about DriverReach as much as it's trying to be educational, be thought leaders, and so on. Under our resources tab, there's links to webinars that are archived, that are on demand, as well as what we have upcoming. There's ebooks and podcasts. I do a podcast with FreightWaves. I just started doing in January, called Taking the Higher Road. And so just that sort of thing. We do DriverReach chats, these little conversations just over Zoom, 20, 30 minutes with other industry, leaders. It's fun to do, and it's helpful because at the end of the day, we're hungry. I mean, I think people are starving for education. How can we be better? And I want to be a resource, for them to go to. Whether, I would say there's plenty of people who download all kinds of our information. And if anybody reaches out to them from a sales perspective, sometimes they're like, we're really not interested. I just really like the information you share.
No, I think that's great, because this is a dynamic, changing world of technology. This wasn't what we were all looking at in 2015.
Yeah.
And 2025 is going to look different than now. So there are going to be upcoming trends, new technology that comes to the forefront, that improves the performance of the recruiting process and its seamlessness, and how much more efficient it makes our lives. So, and you were a great thumb on that pulse, that I definitely think people should be plugged into as an informational resource, because we put out a lot of content. You put out a lot of content. So, and on a variety of subjects. You've had guest speakers on ongoing retention, compensation. You cover a lot of different bases with the things that you explore. So absolutely, if anyone on this call just needs to have more resource information on any of these technical aspects, Jeremy more than likely will have that up on his site. So excellent. All right. So
Mark had commented a couple times on
Sure.
respect, and I really appreciate that. What's interesting, just in the past week, you mentioned, compensation. And this came up. I was having a podcast interview with Leah Shaver, who's a good friend with National Transportation Institute. And we were talking about the parallel of respect and what does that really mean in regards to compensation, in regards to their time and so on. And so I'm working with her on this really, I think it's going to be a really well written blog on respect and what does that mean. So I think Mark has got his finger on that pulse as well. Excited to share that once we put it out.
So no, and I know Dan Baker is all about that. So one thing I'd like to now, since this is the opportunity for the audience to ask you questions about things that have come up, things that they want to ask about their specific programs to help improve. You folks can fire those questions off into the chat. You can also ask them in the Q&A function and we can see them as well. That's at the top there on your action bar. So go ahead and let us know. While you are firing off those questions, just a couple housekeeping things. Our code word of the day, because it is so appropriate for everything that Jeremy just covered, is technology. Code word of the day today is technology. Now, you can do two things with this code word. You can email it today to lindsay.presley@verticalag.com, or you can save it until Friday and just email them all at one time. That is up to you. And Lindsay will keep track of all the entries into the program there. So technology, remember you have to have all 4 code words to be in the drawing for that front and rear facing dash cam. So excellent, excellent. All right, here.
I've got a quick question for
Sure.
Jeremy on compensation before we get into a lot of the, there's the traditional, just increase the sign-on bonus, that'll solve all your problems, or what are you seeing relative to trends on compensation advertising? Is it sign-on bonuses? Is it rate per mile? Is it equipment? Is it what's the feel?
Well, sign-on bonuses is sort of like, it's like the crack out there. It's like, it seems like everybody feels like it's hard because I think a lot of people would like to not do that, but they feel they have to because other people are doing that. And that's this candy sugar attraction, and also you get that sugar high and then it's gone. I think the reality is what's important to a driver when you think about it from their perspective. Drivers, a lot of times that are long haul, over the road drivers, they use that cents per mile as this measure of their value, but that is that's a vanity metric, because it doesn't do you any good if you get 70 cents a mile, but you only go, 150 miles a week. It's really important. What do I make? What am I going to make every week? And is it going to be consistent? It doesn't do me a lot of good to make $2,200 this week, but next week I make $400, or something like that. So that consistency is important. How much can they expect to make on a regular basis? And you don't necessarily have to spell that out, with exact, numbers. Although I think if you can, it's helpful because you don't get into, the drivers that apply are going to be ones that are comfortable with that, whatever that may be. But I do think it's valuable. And I've always been a proponent of having some sort of a minimum guarantee, especially when it is such a variable pay scale. If I can get 3,000 miles in this week, man, I'm going to hit pay dirt. But if I only get 1,600, well, that stinks. Put together some sort of a minimum guarantee. Maybe could be $1,000, $1,200, something along those lines that says, if worst case scenario, you're never going to go below that. It's on us to make sure that that way you've got stability. And I think that matters a lot. I think, again, that kind of plays into some of the measures that you would put in place from a respect standpoint. And it's always got to be, if it's just miles and you're sitting 12 hours over the course of a week without any sort of compensation for that whatsoever, that's not cool. How can we find a way to ensure that we're paying drivers for all of their activity throughout the course of the week? Whether it's billable or not, respect is saying to the driver, I still am going to compensate you for it. I've got X amount of time a week for you, and I want to make sure that you're rewarded X for all of that.
And that's a great answer. Yes. And sometimes disrespect is here's this sign-on bonus. Come on in and you're on your own after you get here.
Well, not only that, you'll never get this sign-on bonus, by the way. We've structured it in a way that's
actually what one of the folks on the call is talking about. Joe is mentioning that, hey, it's $65K. You want a $10,000 bonus? All right, we're going to pay you $55K and then spread that $10,000 out. So you still got 65. So yes, we're picking up what you're putting down on that one. So got a couple questions here that came in. This is from Joey Grosso. You said to keep everything contained within one system, and it would be awesome to have a powerful phone and email system. Does DriverReach have that capability, like Constant Contact or the Mojo Dialer, or can they be integrated with DriverReach?
Yeah, integration is where you get from a phone standpoint. Otherwise, email and text is all incorporated into DriverReach.
Okay.
So yeah, but from a telephone standpoint, a lot of times people already have their existing telephone system that they use. I can't think off the top of my head one that I think either we've finished or we were in the process of working on from an integration. Can't think of the name of the system, but the enabling to just click on a number and start dialing. That's it's better than not being able to do that, but that by itself probably not. It depends. It depends on how important that is from an efficiency standpoint. Probably the companies that are doing a lot of volume is, the companies that matters to more, where they're making a lot of phone calls.
All right. And then a question from Kurt here. Are there any interview processes or formats that you all recommend to use for the one-on-ones? Because I know we talked chatbots already, but obviously chatbot, for those that aren't familiar with that technology, is an AI. It's or artificial intelligence, and it's filtering things before you get to see the data. It's not on that picture that he showed. It was Danny from Grammar. Danny from Grammar was not typing those individual responses. That was the bot.
Right.
But Danny on the back end is going to get the filtered results from that. So is there, that is obviously an option because it's an efficient one, but it's not a true interview with a representative or a candidate rather. Is there anything that you have seen that works better, generates more sticky? Is it more one-on-one group interviews, Zoom, virtual?
Yeah. Zoom is what I'd say. Is just taken this whole concept by storm in this past year. Our phone system was Ring Central, and so we used this Ring Central, meetings, and then all of a sudden Zoom took over, and I felt, Ring Central was just white labeling Zoom's, video chat, platform, and we recognized the value in Zoom, and we ended up just leaving Ring Central and transitioning to Zoom. But the value is, it depends. Do they need to be in person? If so, then you have to accommodate that. But if you can do it, I'm never on the phone anymore. Everything I do is like this. Every conversation I have with somebody, in fact, it's weird if someone sends me, and I send them a Zoom link and they get on and then they're like not showing their camera. I'm like, put your clothes on and turn the camera on.
I'm not gonna lie. I think we've only had one phone conversation in the last 6 months, and it was super weird because it was like weird. I can't see Jeremy talking right now in the library.
I just think there's a lot of value. The best thing is being in person, right? You can't beat that. That's to really build rapport. But that's not practical when you're trying to hire drivers, especially when they're all over the place. But the next best thing is video conversation. If they're in a position where if they've got good, internet access, Wi-Fi access, and they have a camera and they can do this, even if they do it from their phone, I think that's really impactful.
Most of them, if they've got smartphones, they have camera capability on here. There's more than sufficient to be able to pull that off.
This is a whole nother, to talk about that, obviously we focused on technology, we didn't get into the human aspect, the dialogue, the communication that needs to happen between a recruiter or the company and a driver, and how important that is. And that it's all still part of that applicant experience, but anytime you can see each other, you can see expressions, you can read body language and things like that, then you can establish a connection, a rapport that's genuine. And especially, and I say this a ton because of COVID and the crisis that we've been in, never let a good crisis go to waste. What an opportunity we have to really engage with people on a much more human level. I mean, every person on this meeting likely knows somebody who's at least had COVID, possibly knows somebody who's died from COVID. And either way, we've all suffered, not necessarily directly, but indirectly because of something. And so even if it's because we don't believe it and we think this is all nonsense, either way, it has impacted us in a way that it gives us an opportunity to be more human and more empathetic.
All right, we have another question coming here. It's specific about DriverReach and specific about privacy of information for applicants that come in. So if you have an applicant that applies for company A, fills out all the information online, if that doesn't work out and they then express an interest in company B, are they going to have to fill out the information all over again? Is that initial application compartmentalized to company A, so there's no sharing back and forth of that information of that candidate?
Yeah, a couple things. Super good question. I think I touched on it earlier on data privacy. When a driver fills out an application for company A, that's company A only. That data is not then now promoted elsewhere. It's really important to understand that, because that is not the case with some others. And it's just really important to know that, because otherwise I would be sharing this other information saying, hey, here's a guy who applied over here, but he's also might be interested in you. You want to give me some money for this lead? That's just wrong. I mean, ethically, morally wrong. But that being said, if that driver wants to go separately and apply to company B, he does have the ability, or she has the ability, to auto-populate that application with their data based on their credentials. They've got a password, username and password that they've created. So the ability to recall that information from the driver's perspective exists, because that's in the best interest of the driver. That's going to allow them a better experience. But I will say emphatically that driver's data exists only in the company that he or she applies to. Really important thing that I think it's only really becoming an issue lately with data security issues, data privacy issues, with companies feel like they're they're struggling from a retention standpoint, because their drivers that have hired, that they either their applicants or drivers they've hired are going out the back door because they're constantly being marketed to.
I was not aware that there were other folks out there doing that, but yes, that is absolutely a critical item for you guys to make sure that the leads that you have coming in, the folks that are interested in your opportunity, are not being turned around by a third party and resold to someone else, because that will impact your close rate in keeping those people engaged. Let's see, a couple other questions. Are you finding that drivers want an immediate phone call when they fill out that initial information, or do they prefer to continue in text or email?
I think all of the above, and that's, again, not a blanket answer. I think what you should do, if you can, if you're during office hours and a recruiter gets a lead, they should call that driver right away. But there's a really good chance that they're going to leave a voicemail, and as soon as they do, they should leave a text.
Is there a way to, potentially with the systems that you have seen, I don't know with DriverReach specifically or others, to designate, do you want us to text you, call you, email you, and respond, something along those lines?
Yeah. Those are questions that can be added to any lead form, and you can allow that to dictate what happens. But for example, no matter what, the drivers should, I think in most cases, you'd want to set up an autoresponder to respond to all of them. And I wasn't hiring drivers, or I should say I'm no longer hiring drivers, but when I was, if I had the ability to do what I have the ability to do today, I would have an autoresponder that goes out automatically that says something along the lines of, I'll reach out to you right away, or you can click here to schedule a conversation. And, it could be today, could be, tomorrow, as soon as you can. If that driver schedules some time on our calendar for a week from tomorrow, I'm not going to wait till then. I'm going to probably call them, or at least send a text message and say, got your thing. You scheduled it for this day. Do you want to do it sooner? Like, can you talk sooner? At the end of the day, I think if however they're going to engage with us, that's how we need to be willing to engage with them.
Okay.
Path of least resistance, be water.
Oh, you're being Bruce Lee now. So awesome. Well, a couple other things here, housekeeping wise. We did have someone ask if this session has been recorded. It is. We will make a replay link available of every day. We will have a page that we'll send out where those will be housed so that you all can share this information internally with other folks on your team, or rewatch it as well. For those of you who are not familiar with our platform and would like to learn more, we do have a 30-day complimentary trial that we make available where you can kick the tires and take advantage of the system. Heck, you can probably even take advantage of the API with DriverReach if you get up and running quickly, and we can get that implemented and make sure that's communicating back and forth what you need. And that way you can see what kind of training you can deliver, how dynamically that works, how successful it is doing that, and be able to take advantage of it with no risk to yourself. So to find out more about that, you can visit www.infinityworkforce.com/complimentary-trial to find out more. All right here. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our content for the day. Again, tomorrow we will have George Girth, the VP of Safety and Recruiting with Grammar Logistics, joining us to share the great things he's doing with his program so that you can make them great things that you're doing at your program as well. Jeremy, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to visit with you. We always end up talking about way more than we plan to, which is great. It's great. Some of the leading calls that we've had for this, we probably could have talked for 4 hours and covered a whole ground of stuff. So I've got to get on your podcast at some time. So I've decided I need to make that a goal. But everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. We appreciate having you here today. And we will see you here tomorrow at 11:30 Central Time. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.